All right, let's get into it. Today we're exploring a pretty radical approach to making music, one that finds beauty not in perfection, but in total destruction. We're going to be talking all about engineering analog chaos. This one quote from the artist Grandmaster Junglegazer, it really says it all. If the signal isn't fighting for its life, it isn't music. Think about that. It's basically a middle finger to that clean, perfect, digital sound we're so used to. The idea here is that the real magic, the real art, happens right when things are about to fall apart. Okay, so fighting for its life sounds pretty dramatic, right? But what does that actually mean in practice? Well, it all comes down to this core idea of mechanical Darwinism. And this idea, it completely flips the script on what a producer even does. Instead of sitting there programming every single note, every little detail, you become more of a gardener of chaos. I love that phrase. Your job is just to set up a physical system and then kind of see what happens. You're curating the happy accidents. You're letting that ghost in the machine take the wheel for a bit. So who's the mind behind all this madness? Let's talk about Grandmaster Junglegazer. And you gotta understand, we're not just talking about some producer here. This guy is a true pioneer. He's literally inventing his own genres and using these, pretty extreme, hands-on DIY methods to get his sound. Yeah, his whole vibe is just built on raw, physical experimentation. He's making up his own genres, completely rejecting those polished software sounds, all while chasing this gritty, lo-fi pirate radio feel. And this is the key takeaway right here. It is all about creating patterns that are alive, that change and mutate. It's the exact opposite of those boring, static loops you hear everywhere else. So when you're working this way, with all this chaos, you're not just going to end up with a normal track. No, you end up creating entirely new styles of music. So let's take a look. Let's map out this wild new territory he's been carving out. To really get what's so different here, let's do a quick compare and contrast. On one hand, you've got classic jungle. You know the sound, those syncopated amen breaks, that deep sub-bass. But then you have his version, Mahungo. And what he does is he takes that foundation and just destroys it, in a good way. You get these fractured, evolving breaks, glitches from busted gear. The whole thing is just pure, raw, pirate radio energy. So yeah, it's not just one new sound. He's basically creating a whole ecosystem of these micro-genres. And what's really fascinating is when you look at which of these might actually catch on. Experts are pointing to rogue post-jungle and homemade realism. And why? Well, because they just happen to fit perfectly with what's already happening in music right now, that whole deconstructed, lo-fi, DIY aesthetic. Okay, so the big question, how does he actually make these sounds? This is where it gets super fun and, honestly, a little destructive.
First up, one of his most notorious techniques. It's called vinyl chalking. And no, this is not a plugin you can go download. We're talking about literally physically mutilating a vinyl record, like with a knife or a power tool, all in the name of creating a new sound.
The process is, it's pretty brutal but simple. You literally take a record and carve the edge into a jagged sawtooth pattern. Then when you put it on the turntable, that messed up edge makes the needle jump and skip all over the place. What you get is this chaotic, rhythmic glitching that is just impossible to program. It's a one-of-a-kind performance every single time. Okay, next up. Bass fracking. So forget about those smooth, clean 808 bass lines you're used to. This is about taking that bass and turning it into a rhythmic weapon. You just slam it through a whole chain of distortion pedals until it completely breaks apart. It becomes this gritty, percussive thing that just hammers through the track like a drum. And remember how he hates boring static loops? Well, this is how he avoids them. It's a technique called fractal roll swap breaks. The idea is that the parts of the drum kit are always switching jobs. One moment a sound is the kick, the next it's the snare, the rolls just keep rotating. What you end up with is a drum pattern that feels completely alive, because it is literally never the same twice. But his most groundbreaking technique might actually be the one that anyone can try. It's all about taking a piece of old, cheap tech that you've probably got lying around in a closet somewhere and turning it into your main creative partner. And the slogan for this one is simple: let the tape decide. This is for a technique he calls cassette bounce feedback, or CBF for short. And really, it's more than just a technique, it's a whole mindset. It's about letting go of the controls and just letting the machine do its thing. Here's the big idea. You take a cheap old cassette deck and you treat it like a truth machine. All of its physical flaws, the wobble in the tape speed, the hiss, the way the sound gets all crunchy, those are not mistakes you need to fix. That's the whole point. That is the groove. You're embracing the beautiful mess of analog tape because it adds this human, random quality that no software can ever replicate. So how do you do it? It's called the loop of doom setup, and it's actually pretty simple. You send a sound out of your computer and into the cassette deck. The output from that deck gets split in two. One signal goes back into your computer so you can record it. And this is the genius part, the other signal goes right back into the deck's input. You're creating a feedback loop that just keeps building on itself, making all those tape flaws louder and crazier with every single pass. And this is a total game changer for a few reasons. First, it's super accessible. You can do this with a $10 deck from a thrift store. Second, the sound you get is guaranteed to be 100% unique. No one can ever copy it exactly. And third, you can play it like an instrument. You can actually put your finger on the spinning part, the capstan, to slow the tape down and get this amazing wobbly pitch bend effect. No plugin feels that real. So for its pure originality, the amazing vibe it creates, and the fact that pretty much anyone can do it, this technique gets a nearly perfect score, a 9.8 out of 10. People really see this as a true game changer. But check this out. When you break down that score, you see something really cool. It gets a 10 out of 10 for originality and vibe, but only a 4 for consistency. And in this world, that's not a bad thing. That's the whole point. The fact that it's inconsistent is precisely what makes it so original. It guarantees you will never, ever get the exact same sound twice. All right, so let's zoom out a bit. What's the big takeaway from all this deliberate chaos, this planned destruction? What does it all mean for where music is headed? Well, the techniques that are probably going to spread are, you guessed it, the most accessible ones. Cassette bounce feedback, it's cheap, it looks dramatic on a social media clip, it's perfect. Bass fracking, it fits right in with the sound of modern trap and bass music. This whole philosophy of imperfection, it feels like it's really about to take off. And that kind of leaves us with one last big question to chew on. We're moving into an age of AI that can generate flawless, perfect art at the push of a button. So, in that world, maybe the most human thing you can do as an artist, the most rebellious act, is to embrace the things that are broken, the unpredictable, the beautifully flawed. Maybe the future of creativity isn't perfect at all. Maybe it's broken.